Hey folks, this is the first premium content I'm putting out. Thank you everyone for listening, and really thank you everyone for helping support the work I do on my channel and elsewhere. You guys are awesome. So today I'm going to be talking about psychedelics. Before I go on, let me just say that this one's going to be completely off the cuff, and future conversations will be much more structured. I'll have a specific topic I'm talking about. Today I just kind of want to talk about my own background and how I got into this and what my approach to these things are and where I think it's useful for people to take them and how people should proceed and those sort of things. Now, also, I should say going forward, and I really want to put this out here and just say this very, very, very strongly, psychedelics, if you have any type of history of mental illness or, have a hard time differentiating reality from fantasy, then they are not for you. You should not do them. I want to put this out front right away and say that because partially to cover my own ass, but partially because it really needs to be said they're not for everyone. I think more people can benefit from them, but I also think that they should not be. I don't like this idea of, oh, everyone should just get high and you do psychedelics and expand their mind. No, not for everyone. Unfortunately, like a lot of people, I was exposed to the anti-drug propaganda when I was young. And, like most people, I didn't really buy it, especially when I heard about these things called magic mushrooms. And I heard that they came from the earth. They weren't a chemical. And as best I could tell, they weren't going to hurt anybody. But, didn't get to check those out until I got to college. And like most people, I experimented with that and little LSD in college. And, of course I liked it. I learned a lot of things about myself, about the way I think, about my culture that I was indoctrinated into. It was very useful. But I also started to notice that the ways that people were taking psychedelics, wasn't always a comfortable situation for me. And this is something that I think we need more attention to, and I think more people are paying attention to this. So I noticed that what would happen when I would take psychedelics with a group of friends is it would be enjoyable and we'd have fun and giggle and listen to music and there'd be fun things. But what I found happening is I would often, not always, sometimes you get a really good group of people together and it's great, but I would find that often I would be looking forward to when I left my friends and went to my apartment or my room or whatever the situation may be, and kind of got that alone time. And got that alone time where I was just alone with my own thoughts and the substance, and just could kind of see what the substance did to my own thoughts. And at first, I felt kind of guilty about this. I felt kind of weird about this. But as I started to get older, I realized that this was actually very preferable in a lot of ways, and that after doing some reading, I realized I wasn't the only one who had come to this approach. Terence McKenna was very well known for, advocating large doses of psychedelics in silent darkness, and that's essentially how I take them now when I take them. If I'm up real late and I get to see the sunshine, that's a different story. And if I have a chance to be in nature, also a different story. But the point of the silent darkness is the minimum amount of stimuli. That's good for a lot of different reasons. I think the primary one being that you want to take in the drugs and what they're telling you and how they're interacting with your own mind. And you don't want the experience to be about whatever piece of media you're bringing in or whatever types of interpersonal dramas might be going on with the people around you. Now, sometimes it's very important, and sometimes that's part of like a very important healing process, especially if you're in some sort of ayahuasca circle. That's a topic for another day. But in my long run practice, what I have found useful, especially since personally I haven't always had people who were interested in taking these journeys with me, is being able to do these things alone. And this is controversial, and rightfully so. I don't think anybody should take these things by themselves if they've never done them before. I don't think that's a good idea. But I do think if you've got some experience under your belt and you feel comfortable, you should consider doing these things, maybe not alone or in some sort of setting where it is, in some sort of setting where it's silent darkness or minimum amount of stimuli. I think this is how you get the most amount of benefit from it. Some people, the extreme opposite end of this is the people who like to watch a movie or something on psychedelics, and I could never do that. To me, it's like putting earbuds in and going to a concert. Why? Why would you do that? Why you have this concert here? Why would you be trying to listen to earbuds? There's so much intense stimuli you're not going to get another time. You can pop that movie in any time, and so it just baffles my mind when people do that. A little bit of a pet peeve. So I found that the idea of taking them in silent darkness, which Terence McKenna's work on psychedelics was very confirming for me. Because I took psychedelics and I had some people who had some experience before me. The person who kind of ushered me into these things had some experience, and she had some good advice going in initially, and that was great. But then people I started taking it with later were a little more confused and frazzled, and after a while you don't want to do it in those environments. So when I first read a book by Terence McKenna, it was very fascinating because he had a lot of the same deep experiences that I'd had. One of them was the preference for taking them in silent darkness. The other, which was very interesting, was his experience with glossolalia, which is what we would call speaking in tongues. And I had this experience on mushrooms, and it didn't scare me, but it was, I think to a lot of people, it would be terrifying, where I started speaking in this alien voice that was not mine. And it was gibberish, but it wasn't. There was an emotion and a syntax, and he does it sometimes. I've heard Terence McKenna do it sometimes, and I could do it very easily while on ayahuasca or mushrooms. And it's this Haish mononka zinto ruipa intufo has no shon de la shon da mekante has no zintor fompate as no feketa. Okay, I'll stop that now, Kurt. You're probably going, what the fuck is this guy doing? But I had those types of experiences, and they were very powerful. Now, I wanted to keep going with them. I left college, moved back in with my parents, and I decided that I still wanted to pursue these things, especially since I, could have benefited from a little guidance, and I felt they gave me some. And so I started to explore them on my own, mostly again. And the way I find that is very useful to do that, considering the way these things are classified legally, is to stick with plants and fungi, actually. But stick with those, organic substances. Although I think LSD is technically an organic chemical. But still, anyway, my point is, those have a specific profile, which makes them not conducive to law enforcement spending too much time on you unless you're running a really large operation. If you are growing a few mushrooms in your closet, I'm not advocating that. I'm not advocating anything here. Nobody should do these drugs. I've never done these drugs. This is all fiction. My name is not Greg Belvedere. My name is Beg Grelvedere. Okay? Just to make this clear. I may have said Greg Belvedere at some point. That's not true. Anyway, the plant nature of these things makes them very difficult to criminalize, and they don't have the same attraction that certain hard drugs and even LSD have with criminal syndicates. You can't mass manufacture them. You can grow a good amount of mushrooms if you're working really hard, but I mean, not like It's not like LSD where if you're a good chemist, you can make millions of hits in a weekend and, not know what to do with them and have to find somebody to move them for you. I mean, you work really hard growing mushrooms. You can, I don't know, you get the point. I'm not going to give specific weights and stuff. I'm really worried about Patreon's rules and regulations. Patreon's rules and regulations state that you cannot give information on how to manufacture drugs, and I'm not going to do that here. I think it's interesting because I don't necessarily think you can call growing mushrooms or making ayahuasca manufacture, but nevertheless, it's something I want to be rather careful about. Anyway, my point is, these things are easy to come across. The ingredients for them, or the things you need to make them, can be purchased on the gray market and then, made or grown at home. This is a great advantage. You don't need to know a guy, right? That's really what's big. You don't need to know a guy. You don't have a hookup for whatever substance, you're kind of out of luck. But with a minimal amount of money and time and energy, anyone can make a pot of ayahuasca on their stove. Anyone can, grow some mushrooms in their closet. It's pretty easy. There's a video called Mushroom Growing Made Easy, which I highly recommend. The rye seed method is particularly useful. And the Ayahuasca Forum has great information on how to brew ayahuasca. These things are things you can do by yourself, right? And that makes them something that you can use for your own personal use. And it's not a big enough thing that anyone's going to bother you about it. That's that. In the last few years, it's gotten a little tougher. The things you need to grow mushrooms or make ayahuasca have moved more and more into what I would call a gray market. It used to be you could purchase them pretty much online, but now it's gotten to the point where they're kind of de facto banned. They're not out. I mean, so the ingredients for ayahuasca are technically legal. Same thing goes for mushroom spores, which are, the kind of limiting factor if you're growing mushrooms. These things now, credit card companies will not deal with the companies that sell them. So you have to find convoluted ways of giving payments to these companies. I think Bitcoin is probably the most practical, even though I don't really like using Bitcoin that much. So that for me is kind of where I'm at with these things and where I want to take this series talking about them. I think that for me, the three substances I find the most interesting are what I call the Terence McKenna Holy Trinity. You have the tryptamine hallucinogens, your DMT, your ayahuasca, and your magic mushrooms. Psilocybin mushrooms is 4-phosphoroxy DMT. DMT, when I say DMT, I mean the smokable form of DMT, which is really amazing and really kind of cool, but it's also fucking terrifying. And I honestly question how much you can get out of it. It's a little overwhelming. Ayahuasca, one of the main ingredients in it is also DMT, but because DMT is not something your body can absorb or can take in orally, there's another component which is also psychoactive, which is an MAOI inhibitor, which breaks down the enzyme in your stomach that prevents you from taking in the DMT in your stomach. So that is a little bit more accessible to you. You can stretch similar feelings out over and ideas out over hours instead of like 2 minutes where it is with a DMT flash. I think that there's something a little bit unnerving about DMT. I go back to my occult training, which is actually something that has really helped me navigate these spaces, and which I think I'm going to talk about a lot in this series, is the occult and how, I went to Catholic high school, and just having an understanding of religion and some of these religious ideas is very helpful in helping you navigate these spaces. A lot of the rational language and even psychological language will help you, but I think a lot of the occult way of looking things can really give you a lot more guidance than anything else in these areas. And, I have the tarot in my channel a lot. And one of my favorite books on the tarot, Meditations on the Tarot, the author talks about different types of revelations you can get. And the revelations, which are probably the most honest and the ones you should really try and take in, are the ones that are calm, like a still water, like a clear reflecting pool without any ripples in it. The revelations that you should watch out for are the kinds that hit you like a roaring river and overwhelm you. They're very likely overwhelming you for a reason, in the same way that somebody who's all hype needs to, hype themselves up or hype the thing they're selling up in order to overwhelm you. If somebody's coming to you clear-eyed and sensible and earnestly that way, not in like a Sam Harris type of way, they have no need for that. Their truth is self-evident and it reflects clearly at you. And as much as I find DMT really fucking cool, I think it's overwhelming, and something like mushrooms and ayahuasca is much more readily used in a useful way by your body and your mind. And for me, this is something that I think is useful as a regular practice. Something I think, certain people do every few months to kind of clear out their heads and recharge them. When I was working as a librarian in East New York, Brooklyn, it's a pretty rough neighborhood of Brooklyn, I would, as a suburban white kid working in that area, it was a little bit of a culture shock. But I loved it. I really did. I loved a lot of the people I worked with there, and people, the patrons and my staff and the other librarians and clerks there. I really loved it. But there were times when it could be really grinding on me. There is definitely a contingent there of bureaucratic staff members who were just draining. And there was, an element of the public, not all, a lot of people were actually really awesome. But there was an element of dealing with the public in general that can really grind on you. And there were times when I was questioning what I was doing with my life and taking in toxic emotions and thoughts. And this was a good release for me, a good way for me to process those things and help me to overcome them and integrate them into myself and not let them drag me down and let them make me better. And that's what I'm hoping this can provide. I'm hoping this series can give a little introduction on how people can do that in their own lives. And I hope that me sharing this can do that for you. I hope if you're listening to this, you're in a place where you are mentally secure enough that you can move forward with this. And I hope that you can get something out of it that will enrich you and allow you to be a better version of you. I talked a little bit about the occult before, and I think the occult is very useful for navigating these spaces and these ideas. And when people talk about magic, there's lots of different ways we can talk about magic and divide it up. But one useful way I like to think about magic is the difference between a kind of arbitrary magic and a true sacred magic. And what I mean by that, an arbitrary magic is where you're looking at the magic you're doing and you're just thinking about, okay, I want to use this to get this. And I understand it. We all want to get something out of doing anything. We don't want to feel like we're putting effort into something and not getting anything out of it. But the problem with that is we often don't realize that what we want might not really be good for us, and that looking at the world in that way might actually be a really bad way of looking at it. And so what sacred magic is sacred magic is more, that line from the Our Father, let thy will be done. That, I think, is very important. And that's what psychedelics can open you up to. They can open you up to, not in a wishy-washy sort of hippy-dippy way, although a lot of people go there, but it can, and done properly, it can open you up to the place where you can make yourself an instrument of something better. Not that you're diminishing yourself, but you're realizing that in many ways the world and the universe is working through you, and your attempts to try and control it are silly, like ultimately silly, and in fact, you're more likely to be controlled. And it makes more sense than rather trying to control forces that are greater than you. It makes much more sense to try and align yourself with the positive forces that exist in nature and on this planet and in these ecosystems and in this world. That is much more beneficial than trying to get everything else to work for you. That is actually going to fuck you up even more, and is really a big part of the problem we see in the world today. Not that most of us can stop doing it, and to some degree it's necessary, but it's something we need to move away from. And to that extent, I think psychedelics are useful in that. I don't think they're a panacea. I'm going to quote Terence McKenna again, and he called them a gratuitous grace. And he said they were neither necessary nor sufficient for enlightenment. And I would say that I agree with that, and I would also say that they're also neither necessary nor sufficient for any type of political project or revolution. They are a good thing. They are good for a personal growth. They are good for, and they are preferable to other ways of people reaching beyond themselves, because I actually think there's something there. But they're not to be taken as an answer. They are just a tool, and in many cases, what is preferable about them is merely that, they're preferable in the way that I think cannabis is preferable to alcohol. So on that note, folks, I really just wanted to give you a brief introduction to what I want to do with this series. I hope you'll keep listening. I hope you'll share and tell people about this. I hope you get something out of it. So that's it for today, folks. Thank you very much. Remember, all generalizations are stupid, so never speak in absolutes. Rebel Base, out.